Hello everybody and welcome back to the Fortress of Solitude. Today we're going to be talking about Batman Superman World's Finest issue 50, written by Mark Waid with art by Dan Mora, Adrian Gutierrez, colors by Tamara Bonvillain, Luis Guerrero, and letters by Steve Wands. The World's Finest hit a big milestone with its 50th oversized issue that sees the heroes head to see Zatanna to help out with a global case of insomnia which has gripped the Earth. The heroes reveal that Dr. Destiny used the Dreamstone to do this, and with the whole world going 5 days without sleep, Batman and Superman want to enter the dream reality and put a stop to Destiny's plan before everything explodes in anger and violence. Zatanna, however, can't guarantee their safety within the dream world, but sends them in nonetheless, blasting Batman and Superman into the dream world. Jumping right on into the story feels just right. It feels like we're picking up a cartoon on Saturday morning that maybe we haven't seen in a few weeks or haven't watched at all. We're just kind of jumping mid-arc in. Heroes are in the midst of a crazy mission and we are just along for the ride. Something Mark Waid has been doing across this entire series since issue 1, and it's really awesome. Batman soon awakens in the dream world and finds Superman driving the Supermobile, a Superman-themed version of the 1960s Batmobile, which makes Batman think that Clark was always jealous of the cars. Clark, though, reveals that he always dreamed of having a 67 Stingray Corvette with a V8 engine, surprising Batman he knows about engines. Clark says he's a Kansas farm boy, so of course he knows about engines, although the ones he mostly knows about are tractor engines. The duo speed through the city and past an Optimus Prime looking truck and dinosaurs until they come across a literal fork in the road. Before they can choose which way to go, the Supermobile is crushed by Elastigirl and the Doom Patrol, as Superman runs headfirst right into them. Dan Mora being back on the book for the issue and for the dream bending story is so great. It allows him to go all out and do some really cool stuff, which we see a little bit later on in the issue once the dream reality stuff really kicks into high gear. But I like these opening pages, going through the various Batmobiles from throughout history, mostly the movie history. We get the 1960s one, the 89 Burton Batmobile, the Tumbler from the Chris Nolan films. I kind of would have liked to have seen more, but I really like how he changed them up with the Superman designs, give them Superman colors. They look really cool. Then you have the Optimus Prime in the background, something that Mora has snuck into a couple of works now, and it's really fun. It's just a big old nerd having some fun with his art. As Batman and Superman are thrown from the car, they end up in another part of the dream where Batman is attacked by Catwoman, who only appeared since Batman thought of her in an instant, and the dream took that thought and conjured her up. Superman gives him a little bit of crap for that, wanting Batman to get his head in the game and he shouldn't be fraternizing with a criminal, since what type of example is that setting for Robin or any of the Teen Titans? Batman knows that Selina does indeed belong behind bars, but in the grand scale of things, dealing with killers like Joker and Mr. Freeze take more of his time than dealing with simple jewel thieves like Catwoman. Clark thinks that's a great excuse, but he does think that there is a chance at redemption for these villains. The dream shifts again thanks to Superman's words and sees the time they battled Joker, the Devil Nezza, and Eclipso, people Batman thinks are beyond redemption, since in order to be redeemed, you kinda gotta have a soul to redeem, something he knows the Joker, Nezza, and Eclipso do not have. So I now get this as kind of very big clip show type vibes from this, that's what this story more or less is, it's the greatest hits of Waid's World's Finest, Devil Nezza, Joker, Eclipso. We see some more stuff later on, the Mixel Spitlick and Batmite, all that sort of stuff. Those can be really tricky to do, those clip show episode issues, because oftentimes it's just filling the page with stuff we've already seen, kind of recycling art, doing all that sort of stuff. I do like that Dan Mora is actually doing original art for all these stories, most of which he did draw at the time, so I quite like that. But I do like that Waid is kind of using that as the backdrop to just have Batman and Superman talk about how they deal with the villains, how they go about being a superhero, and how they differ from each other. And Batman doesn't think some of these villains are worth saving because they have no souls and he can just lock them up, whereas Superman's always open to having someone find a redemption in them, and he wants to help them find that. I like that they make that very clear differential here. Waid does a really good job at that, and he's done that throughout throughout his entire run here. Batman and Superman realize that they are losing sight of the mission as they come across Metamorpho, who points them in the right direction as they venture into a snowstorm, finding more warped versions of the villains they fought in recent years. But something begins happening where Batman becomes a bit more antagonistic towards Superman, telling Superman that he has earned Superman's trust and even trained a partner successfully, something even Superman failed at, as Boy Thunder was lost to them through time and eventually became the villain Magog. The heroes argue and Bruce morphs into a giant bat creature, angered that everyone loves Superman, since what type of monster wouldn't? Given it's the 50th issue, it's really refreshing that Wade has refrained from having Batman and Superman resort to fighting each other. I think he's done it like once before throughout his entire 50-issue run, and much like this time, it was technically in mind control, being pitted against each other. So in my view, that doesn't really count because they're not actually fighting one another. I do also like what they're fighting over. They're not fighting because, a villain has made them, believe that one is better than the other. They're actually fighting against like their very real insecurities with one another, things that they have in their minds deep down that they're able to like push down and, not pay attention to and kind of get over. But it's that very human aspect. Batman's kind of jealous that Superman gets all this praise for doing essentially what he does. Superman doesn't like that he failed Boy Thunder, failed David, which he would later learn that he didn't really, but also he kind of still did, and he's still harboring all of that. So I like that he's building off of things that we have seen throughout this entire run and bringing it to a head here, 50 issues in. It's not something that's happening, issue 2. Batman and Superman battle across the Dreamworld as Dr. Destiny watches, calling them his puppets to command as this is all his world. Superman, who's been hit by kryptonite spears from Batman, decides to not let the rock hurt him in the dream, since after all, this is his dream, so if he wants to, he can negate the effects of kryptonite. So far, I wish Wade had utilized the dream concept a little more than this. This stuff is really good, but this is like the only aspect of that sort of stuff we get where Superman is able to just be like, oh, it's a dream. Oh, kryptonite doesn't hurt me in the dream because that's what I dream of. I wish we got more of that sort of stuff, but it doesn't really do any of that. And I guess it's, fears of trying to rehash something he's already done, because we've actually had quite a couple of dream-themed stories in World's Finest. Eclipso was more or less, dream-themed, illusions, that sort of stuff. And then there's some other stuff a little earlier on, but I can see where he wants to not do the same thing over again, but just maybe, do something a little bit more with the creative setup you've been given. The fight intensifies and Superman snaps in anger, intending on killing Batman, but upon hearing his own voice say that he's going to kill, he snaps out of the dream alongside Batman, who knows that they both have been acting very out of character. The heroes confront Dr. Destiny, who knows that they took his bait, although he is disappointed they broke from the illusion so quickly since he wanted them to fight more, but he's not too worried, since in the dream world, they cannot beat him. Batman and Superman actually do something very surprising here as they lean into the dream a bit more, reminding Destiny that when they are together, they are a villain's worst nightmare. The heroes transform into monstrous, warped versions of themselves as they attack Dr. Destiny, and this is the stuff I like. We're getting to see the heroes from the villain's POV and how, in a villain's eyes, they're the monsters, and I like that we get to see Batman and Superman turn into these grinning monsters who attack the innocent Dr. Destiny. I quite like that, and seeing Dr. Destiny get lost in his own dream, driven mad by the idea that he is beaten by the heroes, that's great. And I wish we get to see more villain POVs like this, where they are so deluded into thinking these guys who are fighting them are like literal demons and monsters who they have to fight and win against. It's really cool. Thanks to the heroes' assault, the dream is smashed apart and they pull Dr. Destiny back into the real world where Zatanna is waiting. As Superman deals with Dr. Destiny, Zatanna asks Batman how they caught him, and Batman knows the same way they always do. They worked together as the world's finest team. That was a fun little story about Batman and Superman and, how they overcome their own problems, work together as an effective team, how, it's that opposites attract thing where, they have basically opposite views on how to deal with a villain, who is redeemable in the eyes of these heroes. Yet you put them together and they work, it's that peanut butter and jelly. It just works. It's a dream concept. And speaking of dream concepts, I do think Wade could have used the dream concept a little bit more. We got little hints at like some real creative stuff there, but just kind of wish we got to see a bit more of it. This wasn't the only story in the issue, as the world's finest partners also get their own story, as Batman and Superman arrive at the Batcave to find Supergirl, Batgirl, Robin, and Jimmy Olsen all arguing over a recent adventure they had. Jimmy explains to the heroes how the so-called Jimmy Olsen Revenge Squad had just dealt with Condiment King. However, Batgirl and Supergirl mention how Jimmy and Robin probably wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for their intervention. To settle who actually did the hard work in taking down Condiment King, Jimmy wants to have a little bit of a contest, a fetch quest of sorts, the target being something no one has been able to find, which after Robin quickly asks Batman, the team learn is the Egyptian statue of Durlan. Wade has done a couple of Supergirl, Robin, Jimmy, Batgirl team-up issues across his world's finest, and they're always really fun little side quests, little backup side quests. One thing that I've enjoyed about the run in World's Finest is, while Superman and Batman are obviously the world's finest, like that's their team, their little team, Wade has also taken that moniker and applied it to basically every hero that's ever appeared in this. Like, them appearing in this series means they're part of the world's finest, and that includes people like Supergirl, Batgirl, and even Jimmy Olsen. Speaking of Jimmy, after learning of the artifact, Jimmy claims that he went back to the Jimmy Olsen Command Center, which is just his desk at the Daily Planet, and had all his interns do all his research on the statue of Durlan. Superman coyly tells Jimmy that he knows Clark, and Clark told him that Jimmy once asked Perry for an assistant, and all Perry did was laugh in his face and then yell at him. Jimmy waves it off as nothing, claiming that after finding the info he needed, Robin picked him up in the Batplane and they sped off to Egypt. Batman thinks that the Jimmy Olsen Revenge Squad won the contest, but Batgirl doesn't think so just yet, since, well, the boys actually found the location of the statue. Her and Supergirl did some digging and actually found the origins of the statue, which chronicled the story of Pharaoh Thutmose III, who says that they were approached by a visitor from afar who the pharaoh thought was a great threat to his throne. The girls believe this to be the sculptor of the statue, and learned the pharaoh had him and his creations banished to the Dara cave in the west desert of Egypt. Supergirl tries to see into the cave surrounding the desert with her X-ray vision, but cannot see through all of the lead in the rock below them, meaning they have to venture in the old-fashioned way. During their investigation, Kara and Barbara begin to talk about the boys, with Barbara revealing that she actually kind of finds Jimmy a bit cute, something Kara cannot believe, shouting Jimmy's name at a high volume, as if his ears were burning, which is kind of a real possibility since Kara just shouted at full volume. Jimmy appears as he and Robin have also found the cave, all thanks to Jimmy's trusty echolocation helmet. It's a shame we never really got a full series about this group of characters. Their arcs, like I said before, are really great. They're just, little cool adventure side quests, having fun, beating a villain or doing something like this, a big contest or something. And I think there's just enough juice in it just to do a full series. Something that's just, again, fun adventures around the world, maybe stopping at Gotham, Metropolis every now and then, bring in some other young heroes and not make it, basically a Teen Titan book, but, just have, the main characters be, Batgirl, Supergirl, Jimmy, and Robin, and they're just, the varying different combinations of those characters throughout different arcs would be really fun. And again, that I think would appeal to like younger audience, young adult audiences. You have these younger heroes in there. You have a bit of romance in there. You could do something with that. I think there's something there, and I think money on the table. Basically, they're leaving money on the table if they're not going to do something like this. It'd be great, a great little like companion piece to the World's Finest book. Back in the cave, Jimmy uses his echolocation device to find a jagged rock on the ground, and upon touching it, the ground gives out and the team fall into a dark void. After Batgirl lights her torch, the team find that they have found the fabled statue, which they bring back to the Batcave, revealing its giant form to Batman and Superman, who find the gold dagger sticking out of its chest. Jimmy doesn't wait around for the Batcomputer to run any scans though, as he yanks the dagger out, and as soon as the dagger leaves the statue, it morphs, proclaiming that it is free at last. So Wade drops a really cool twist here, as the statue isn't some, mystical Egyptian being called Durlan. It actually means Durla, the planet of the shape-shifting aliens called the Durlans. And this being was a Durlan god, or a Durlan ruler. The shapeshifter demands to know how long they've been encased in the stone, as it transforms into a Kryptonian drang, giant snake dragon monster. I really like like this twist, turning the threat from, a simple terrestrial threat, a mummy rising from the dead into something intergalactic. And then also making it the Durlans was really cool. The Durlans have kind of seen a resurgence as of late in the DCU. They were a big part of Jeremy Adams' early Green Lantern stuff. They've just kind of been around since then, appearing here and there. And I kind of like that they are kind of making a swing back. I wonder if it has anything to do with the Skrulls not really being a thing at Marvel now, since they all kind of got wiped out recently. So I wonder if, since, those shapeshifters are gone, the Durlans can kind of come back and not be seen as, an inferior copy, which they, kind of are, since they kind of do the same sort of thing as, the Skrulls do. But I kind of like that they're now back as, common threats that heroes have to face. I like that they're not being overused either. They're not being shoved in everything now. Again, this is the third appearance of them since they came back in the Green Lantern books. So it's fun seeing them appear every now and then. It's a cool little twist to a story. The heroes try and throw everything they have at the dragon, but nothing works. Not even Jimmy's secret missile he's been carrying around in his luggage the entire time. As the heroes try and fight the monster head-on, Jimmy digs through the cases he has to try and find a way to stop the beast, realizing that he can do it with the dagger. Gathering Supergirl, Batgirl, and Robin, Jimmy runs at the monster's towering body, plunging the dagger back into it with his friends. The dragon instantly turns back into the stone statue, going dormant yet again. See, turning the being back into the stone statue and, making it known that, you take the dagger out, the stone, turns back into the Durlan, makes me think that Wade is going to bring this being back at some point down the line. He's set stuff up like this in the past through runs, like Eclipso and all that sort of stuff, Devil Nezza stuff. So I could see this coming back in some way, shape, or form in a future arc for World's Finest. They got to deal with the Durlans again. The Durlans found out their god king being is on Earth and they come and, rescue him or something. The story there, and Wade never sets stuff like this up unless he has a story in mind for it. Batgirl assures Superman that the being is not dead. They are just turned to stone until a suitable intergalactic prison can be found. Supergirl thinks that they should call this contest a tie since they all work together to stop the being, but Jimmy has to get the last word in, and he mentions that technically he was the one who came up with the dagger idea, causing the girls to yell at him about the Jimmy Olsen revenge squad again, as Batman wonders if the young heroes know they have to clean up the Batcave now since it's a mess. Superman is more than happy to leave them to clean it up since he wants to go upstairs with Batman and find out what Alfred has cooking. Batman Superman World's Finest issue 50 was a fun, colourful ride celebrating the book's monumental 50 issues. Wade wrote 2 really cool stories about a cast of characters he's assembled across the 49 issues, and a cast of characters he very clearly loves. And maybe also set up a couple of things for some books in the future, a couple of hints at some plots he might have cooking up with dreams and maybe some intergalactic shape-shifting aliens. Could lead to some really cool things. I do think the dream reality stuff with the Dr. Destiny story could have been used a little bit better. It was hinted at that there were some really interesting ways he could have done it with the heroes tapping into the dreams a little bit more, but it didn't really go that far. But it was still a really fun ride. Dan Mora and Adrian Gutierrez's art across both stories was just brilliant, fantastic, colorful, vibrant. I just loved all of that sort of stuff, and it made for a really fun issue 50. And here's to 50 more issues of World's Finest. I'm going to give this issue a 7.5 out of 10.